So, Eric, we've kind of watched you grow through from being a player to where you are now in the ACC network. I just have a couple of questions for you to kind of get to know a little bit about your experience so far. So, this really was the first season of the ACC network. What has been your most memorable experience so far on the network?
Yeah, it's been a fantastic year, man. I tell you what, just the people that we've been able to meet, the different staffs that we've had the privilege to work with across the ACC, and really just spend some time with, people other than the Clemson Tigers, which I've known my whole career here, right? So it's been a lot. It's been really cool just to see, number one, how much influence the Paw has, and what it's been able to do throughout this conference. But again, just to meet new people and to have those new experiences. But my favorite or most vivid memory really was that launch night. August 22nd, when we're sitting on the desk and that red light comes on for the very first time, and there was 50 people in the room, and we just launched a new network. It truly was remarkable to be one of the first faces ever seen on the ACC network, and I'm just honored, humbled, and blessed to be a part of this team, man.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're the poster child right now. You're all over every billboard, every commercial. So get used to it. That beautiful smile is everywhere. And then you got honored at the Clemson game, which is really awesome to see you on the field and have Dale Gilbert kind of announce that you were going to be on the cast there on the ACC network. So that's cool. I wake up in the morning and I see you at sometimes, not every day, but I see you over there at Packer and Durham. So I know that's exciting for you, even though it's a little early in the morning compared to your night show on the weekends. But
Right.
I was expecting you were going to say about that bounce that Jock Collinsworth did off of you. I thought that was going to be your most memorable. I mean, you basically knocked him through the wall, I believe, when I watched that. I thought that was
certainly unplanned and definitely most laughable moment for sure. But that's kind of what happens with live TV, right? You never know what's going to pop up.
First of all, I want to thank you for joining us as well. Obviously you do an awesome job on the ACC network. I love hearing your interviews with Qualk and Kelly, but I'm obviously glad to see that you've taken the next step in your career and joined the Morgan Thomas Show with Big Al. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to take you back a few years, and I have a little bit of a backstory. So bear with me for a minute while I ask you this. But I wasn't real big in recruiting back during high school, first couple years of college. But I walked into an 8 a.m. class one day in Lowry with my buddy Greg Guerrero, who should actually be watching with us tonight. And he's got his phone open to one of these Clemson sites, okay, that's tracking National Signing Day. And let's be honest, seeing these recruits just kind of pile in one after one was a lot more interesting than whatever the professor was saying at the moment, so we just kind of dove right in. He kind of told me about this big time running back we had a shot with at the time. His name was Jamie Harper. I was immediately hooked as we tracked his recruitment and as he committed to Clemson later that day. So now I have Greg to thank and blame for my recruiting info addiction. But I found my wife later that year, my future wife later that year at Clemson as well, found out the same thing about my father-in-law, Mr. Cleland, who's also watching with us, also a recruiting junkie, loved to give me the latest news and notes and updates about Clemson. So he told me I was sitting on his couch one day, he looks over from his computer, wants to tell me about this absolute stud 4-star tight end from Fayetteville, North Carolina, named Eric McClain. That was back before everybody knew it was Eric Mac Clain, by the way. So we were checking out film at some of the first film I've ever watched, and we just knew that you were going to be the next big thing at tight end for Clemson. We loved your size, thought you caught well, thought you'd be a great run blocker. We were just really excited about what we saw. So fast forward just a few years, you are making your transition to the offensive line at Clemson. So I kind of want you to tell us a little bit about that experience. Who kind of brought that to the table? How did you handle it then? And kind of how do you feel about it looking back?
Yeah, and that's it's such an interesting story because obviously being a bigger guy at tight end, that's what everyone says right away, right? Is he's not that fast, he's not going to work in this Chad Morris offense. Let's put him at offensive tackle. And really from day one, that's kind of what I heard from outsiders, no one on the team, of course, but different media outlets or things of that nature. It's just something that I always not resented, but almost did. I was like, no, I'm going to be a tight end. This is something that I want to do. I obviously have only played that position and maybe some defense my entire career. I have no idea how to play offensive line, so that would be silly to make that transition. And then in 2012, we were playing NC State and really just had a strange number of guys on the offensive line get hurt, and we were pretty thin at the offensive line that year, and it was really weird. Like 4 guys got hurt in the NC State game, and it was just something that really kind of hurt our team a little bit because we had, again, the low number of depth and such small amount of depth that really that next day, and at the time I had bulked up to about 265, was just a bigger guy and could gain weight easily, put on muscle easily, and I lived with 2 other offensive linemen. So on that trip home, I was just talking with them and saying, guys, like, I think I need to help the team and make this transition. And of course, being offensive linemen, they were all about it. So it probably wasn't the smartest thing to take advice from them to make that transition. But then, I thought about it some more, prayed about it, talked with my family, and then eventually went to Dan Brooks, actually, who was my recruiter. He knew how passionate I was about playing tight end, staying tight end. And of course, I'd have the longest relationship with him out of anybody on the staff. I'd known him back in his Tennessee days. And he said, whatever you think is best for you, I know you're going to be successful. I know you're going to be great at it. So after that, I went and talked with Coach Sweeney. And, again, another guy who knew how important it was for me to play tight end to myself. And, he said, I think you can be an NFL tight end. Obviously you're not going to be a guy that stretches the field like some do, but, a big third down blocker, short route guy. And ultimately we just decided it would be best for the team to make that switch. And it was a long process. It took a lot of 6 meals a day, extra lifting, a bunch of different things. But, we woke up 6 months later and I was at 300 pounds. So it was a long journey though.
I went to the ACC Media Day, or the Clemson Media Day today, Eric. It was at the indoor practice facility. First time I'd ever done anything like that, and it was a great experience for me. I didn't get a chance to meet or really talk to Trevor Lawrence or Travis Etienne because, the media swarms around those guys, right?
Right.
But the great thing is they don't really swarm. I guess it's, not that great, but they don't really swarm the offensive linemen. And I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. But the great thing is they really understand not only the offensive side of the ball, but they really understand the defensive side of the ball. I had Sean Pollard talking about how he just really valued how hard Brent Venables worked them in practice and how serious he took practice, because they felt like, hey, if we can make it through a Brent Venables practice without looking like a fool, then we ought to be okay in the game. Now, do you feel like that when you were there, is that kind of your experience that you had as far as the practices were as hard or harder than the games?
I think we were right on the verge of that, right? And maybe in a couple of years, like 2014, we had the number 1 defense in the country. That was a dogfight. Every single practice, it was, you better bring it or you're going to get embarrassed. 15, we were a little bit younger, still had some good guys, but we were younger. But I feel like, 16, especially 18 and 19, I mean, those are the best defenses that they're going to see all year, is what they see each and every day. And you reflect back to some of those Florida State teams in the 90s, practice was harder than any game they played. And I think that's right kind of where Clemson is right now, and I know that they're hopeful to continue that throughout the beginning of this decade in 2020, and moving forward that they're just replacing and refilling and reloading all over in recruiting, which we just touched on, where they want that competition to be harder than Saturdays. They want Tuesday, Wednesday to be more difficult, more stressful, more strenuous than anything that you're going to see in a stadium that you play in. So I think that they certainly have reached that level these last 2 years, and they're going to look to continue that.
Clemson, as we know, if you follow the Tigers, they're losing a ton on the offensive line next year in particular. Simpson's gone, Ankram's gone, Pollard's gone, Cervenka's gone. I mean, that's an insane amount of talent that's taken off this year. So kind of, if you would, hopefully we can have you on another time and kind of go more in depth, but give us a little preview of what you think the offensive line might look like next year, maybe a starting lineup or something like that.
Yeah, I think when you obviously look at it, right, there's so much leadership, there's so much depth, guys that have been playing together for quite a long time. And it's going to be something that they're going to have to figure out, right? It's going to be something that having 4 new starters is really something that they haven't faced with since my senior year. When we had, ourselves going into the starting with Joe Gore emerging as a starter, myself again, Mitch Hyatt, a freshman, stepped up to play. But I think obviously Jackson Carman is going to be your anchor at left tackle, a guy that's played a lot of football, has played very well, and really I think has been a nice surprise and an upgrade at left tackle. I think he's a nasty guy. I think that he's a road grader and a great pass protector as well. And then you move to the left guard. Obviously, Mac Bockhorst is going to step up big, a guy that has played a ton this year and previously in his career. Again, he's nasty. He doesn't care to be friends with you. He's a guy that's going to hit you over and over again, pile you into the ground, and then laugh at you. Going to center, it's probably going to be Cade Stewart, another guy who's had a ton of reps and snaps. He'll be a redshirt senior next year, so to finally get his chance to start, I know how much that means to be a fifth-year guy to finally pave the way and be a starter. Right guard is maybe where there's some question marks. You might see some freshmen or redshirt freshmen step in there. Will Putnam, it was a guy from Florida, really good athlete, a guy who I think could have played a little bit this year. But again, we'll see how well he does if he's there, or another one of these great freshmen, because there are a ton coming in this next class that are going to be pushing for starting time. And then you look at right tackle, Chandler Reeves, and I can't remember the other young man's name who got hurt this year. That those two are probably going to be fighting for that starting spot. So it's going to be very interesting to see who at the end of the day, shakes out of the 5 that run out there. But there's no doubt that the future of the offensive line is in great hands with Robbie Caldwell. He is a true genius of football. He knows the game so well, and really does a great job at cross-training these guys, right? He puts them into a bunch of different positions and wants them to be successful until they finally, kind of find a home.
What's the one key, if you could leave us with one key for the Clemson Tigers to win against LSU? What's the one key that you really want to see from your alma mater?
Well, really, it's just, guys doing what they're supposed to do and what they've done all year in the defensive backfield. You look at Clemson, the number 1 passing defense in the country, what they've been able to do from an efficiency standpoint, from a numbers standpoint, just execution, getting their hands on footballs and creating turnovers. This is your biggest test of the season, and you wouldn't want it in any other game but the national championship, and you're going against the Heisman Trophy winner, the Biletnikoff winner, the offensive line of the year. So, it's all set up to kind of have that chip on your shoulder underdog mentality. Just absolutely go play focus football. But again, at the end of the day, this is going to be such a great game. I cannot wait to watch it.